Before I get started with this commentary, I have to give a shout out to Demetrius Jones for sending me this well-deserved update of a story that I have been following for quite some time. I have to also give a shout out to Harvey because it's through him that I was able to even pick up this story and run along with it for as long as I have. And also, I wasn't planning on doing this as a Triple P, believe it or not, but I said, I have deprived my subscribers and my loyal followers of a Triple P for a while, and I've actually missed doing it. It's probably only been like a little over a week or maybe 2 weeks. I don't know. I can't remember the last time I did one. It's been a while, but I said, let me go ahead and turn this into a Triple P. So, in case you may not have heard, and you may not have heard because there's so much going on, Keith Raniere, the man who is the founder, leader, and pretty much overall showrunner, if you want to call it that, of the world-renowned sex cult known as NXIVM, has been sentenced to 120 years in prison. Well deserved, and that is the perfect verdict for him. So I'm gonna go ahead and read this article coming from MSN. Keith Raniere promised a path to happiness, seducing wealthy people who felt they lacked a higher purpose in life. His company NXIVM offered self-improvement workshops that became popular in Hollywood and business circles. But beneath the surface, Mr. Raniere was a puppet master controlling a cult-like criminal enterprise. Prosecutors revealed at his trial some women in NXIVM were sexually abused by Mr. Raniere and even branded with his initials in a secret ceremony. On Tuesday, Mr. Raniere, age 60, was sentenced to 120 years, effectively life, in prison for sex trafficking and other crimes. The sentencing in federal court in Brooklyn followed hours of often wrenching testimony from 15 victims, many of whom described how Mr. Raniere had left them traumatized and struggling to make themselves whole again. The first to speak was a witness identified only as Camilla, who, in a trembling voice, recalled the precise date that she was sexually abused by Mr. Raniere, September 18th, 2005. She was 15 and he was 45. He insisted, she said, that they both recognized the date as their anniversary. That's a sick ass man. The relationship lasted 12 years, Camilla said, with Mr. Raniere expecting her to be available for sex at all hours. He ordered her to weigh less than 100 pounds and directed her to get an abortion. She says she attempted suicide once. I want to move on, but he has damaged me in so many ways, said Camilla, who added that she was still having trouble figuring out the line between an abusive and normal relationship. Camilla's mother, brother, and a sister also spoke on Tuesday, telling the judge that Mr. Raniere destroyed their once close-knit family. The father and oldest daughter in the family, who had a child with Mr. Raniere, are still supporters of him. That's crazy. Mr. Raniere had a sexual relationship with all three sisters in the family. Another victim, India Oxenberg, told the court that Mr. Raniere tried to poison her relationship with her mother, the actress Catherine Oxenberg, whose efforts to extricate her daughter from the organization were part of the recent HBO documentary series about NXIVM called The Vow. India Oxenberg said Mr. Raniere expected her to wait naked for him, like a piece of meat. She became so thin under his manipulation that she stopped getting her period. You are a sexual predator and you raped me, India Oxenberg said. When you touched me, I recoiled. Mr. Raniere's conviction last year capped a stunning downfall for a man who was once idolized by his followers, but has since been exposed as a fraudster who exploited NXIVM's adherents for money, sex, and power. Former NXIVM members said Mr. Raniere and his inner circle preyed on insecure people who hoped that immersing themselves in expensive self-help classes would unlock the key to fulfillment. Even highly educated people became trapped inside Mr. Raniere's system, which he sold as the only way to overcome their fears, shaming anyone who tried to quit. At Mr. Raniere's trial, prosecutors lifted the veil on a sordid side to NXIVM. A primary focus was a secretive woman-only group inside the organization. During a videotape initiation ceremony, the women lay naked on a table saying, "Master, please brand me." as a cauterizing pen seared their skin without anesthesia. Some of those women testified that they thought they were joining a women's empowerment group, only to discover that they were directed to have sex with Mr. Raniere. The women referred to themselves as slaves, needed permission to eat, and were regularly required to hand over collateral like sexually explicit videos, which they constantly feared would be released. Prosecutors called it extortion. On Tuesday, a former quote-unquote slave, identified only as Nicole, told the judge that the collateral was the only thing stopping her from spitting in Mr. Raniere's face during her time in the group, which she described as the most degrading experience of her life. I had never agreed to give up the right to my body, she said. A jury convicted Mr. Raniere in June 2019 after a 6-week trial. Prosecutors charged him with racketeering, applying a statute that had been used to dismantle the mafia families in New York. Besides sex trafficking, the jury found him guilty of crimes that included child pornography, forced labor, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. Prosecutors have said in court papers that Mr. Raniere deserves a life sentence, a punishment that is typically reserved for cases involving deaths or murders. Mr. Raniere's lawyers have argued that nobody was shot, stabbed, punched, kicked, slapped, or even yelled at. This was not the typical organized crime case, and Mr. Raniere should get no more than 15 years in prison, they contended. No one has ever testified that he or she joined a drug gang or the Genovese family or a cartel because they thought that by doing so, they could make the world better or bring a higher level of humanity to themselves and others, his lawyers wrote. Prosecutors have said Mr. Raniere's unwillingness to accept responsibility and his contempt for his crimes demonstrate that a life sentence is the only way to stop him from hurting more people. It's not, reading that part right there says to me that if he was going to at least accept responsibility and take accountability for what he did, they probably would not have passed down such a hefty sentence. But because he was very arrogant about it and very egotistical, they was like, okay, this guy's not going to accept responsibility or any kind of accountability for what he did, so we're just going to slap him with as many years as we possibly can give him. So he could have probably had a way where he could have less years, or something that would have been to the point where he probably would have been able to get out years from now and still alive. But because he felt pretty much no remorse for what he did, and he probably felt he was right for what he did, it was like, okay, there's no way we can allow this person to still stay on the outside or even have a chance of coming out of prison. So we're just going to give him all of these years so he can die behind those prison walls. To this day, Mr. Raniere has many supporters who believe he was wrongfully convicted and insist that every activity in NXIVM was among consenting adults. Dozens wrote letters to the court urging leniency. Mr. Raniere himself has expressed no regrets, accusing the federal judge Nicholas G. Garofis, of corruption and demanding a new trial. He is not sorry for his conduct or his choices, his lawyers wrote in a court filing last month, adding that he intends to fight this case with all of his might, confident that he will one day be vindicated. In recent months, Mr. Raniere has spearheaded a campaign to overturn his conviction. He has directed his supporters to create a podcast about his case and set up a contest to find errors in his prosecutions in exchange for a $25,000 cash prize. Wow. I have never heard of something like that before. He's actually willing to give a cash prize to anyone who can find a way to vindicate him. And you don't think people out there are going to be desperate enough to do that, especially in this decaying economy? $25,000 in cash is on the line. In recent months, Mr. Raniere, I almost read the same part twice, excuse me. The company was funded in large part by an heiress to the Seagram's liquor fortune, Clara Bonfrin, who spent more than $100 million of her inheritance to sue Mr. Raniere's enemies and support the organization. She even bought an island in Fiji that NXIVM leaders used as a retreat. One of NXIVM's top recruiters was Allison Mack. I was wondering when they were going to bring her up. The former television actress known for her role on Smallville, whose glowing testimonials helped bring Hollywood celebrities into the organization. The Dalai Lama once spoke at a NXIVM event. Mr. Raniere was charged along with 5 women in his inner circle, including Ms. Bonfrin and Ms. Mack. Each of them pled guilty ahead of his trial. Ms. Bonfrin was sentenced last month to no more than 6 years in prison for her role in NXIVM. The others do not have sentencing dates as of yet. The group's sales pitch claimed that Mr. Raniere was a genius with one of the highest IQ scores in the world. In reality, prosecutors have said he graduated with 2.26 grade point average from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York, after failing some of the math and science classes that he later bragged about taking. Many NXIVM members never had a sexual relationship with Mr. Raniere, but they did face pressure to pay for more and more classes, sometimes taking on debt to do so. One couple estimated they spent $300,000 on NXIVM courses and were forced to declare bankruptcy, prosecutors have said. Since Mr. Raniere co-founded NXIVM in 1998, around 18,000 people have taken his courses in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Whew, that was a lot to read. Now, this is a more serious Triple P. It's only a Triple P in the sense that, like I said, I haven't done one in a while, and because this guy got exactly what he deserved. But I can't even really make light of this situation right here, because there's more organizations out there that operate in this manner and probably do a whole lot worse. But the fact that, you have this guy right here, and a lot of these people who are leaders of cults have that same type of mind frame and that same attitude as he does. Like, they felt like they were doing something beneficial to the world, or they felt like they weren't doing anything wrong. Because I can't say he, I have to say they, because there are some women out there who lead and run sex cults just like this one, are probably even worse. And I'm just glad that they finally got this guy where he needs to be. I hope that there's no chance for him to appeal, because someone like that does not need an appeal or a chance to either walk away from this or have years shaven off, because he is going exactly where many would agree deserves he needs to go. Now, what's crazy is the fact that he has still a lot of supporters even after what he did, especially that part where it says about one of the people he had messed with and ended up getting pregnant. The one where they said he messed with all three sisters. They said that the dad supports him. Like, that's crazy. The dad and another sibling supports him. That's wild, that to even think that, like, your daughters was literally in a bad situation where they probably could have died, and this guy, you choose to still support him. That's crazy. But that's the world we live in. Sometimes your own family be even worse than complete strangers. But I'm glad that he's found that I guess you can say the cap has been sealed on this particular case. Hopefully, if we do hear about it again, it's nothing about an appeal. But now we need to figure out what is going to happen to Allison Mack, because they haven't mentioned what her sentencing or what she's going to get, because it says that her and that other woman both pled guilty ahead of his trial, but they only said what that woman is going to get, that she's going to get no more than 6 years. But that no more than 6 years, that could be 6 months. But they haven't said what's going to happen with Allison Mack. Now, that's the one I'm really curious of what's going to happen to her, because notice they don't really talk about her, and we know why they don't talk about her. And it's actually through Harvey that I actually learned about who she was, because I didn't watch Smallville, and to learn about this woman's behavior and the roles that she played in this rather interesting scheme. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments, and I will talk to you in the next one.